So they lived in Connecticut, and it's where I grew up. This happened when I was like 14. It was either right after Ed Warren passed away, or not too long after. Me and my dad were staying at my aunt's house one night. It was a two-family house, so her and my uncle, as well as my cousin, her husband, and their two children, all lived there. It was a new house they had just built and moved into a couple months back. I found this part out later. Leading up to that night, my aunt was having crazy dreams where a little boy would appear in her dreams every night. Or so she thought they were dreams, and lead her out of my bed. My aunt said the outside of the house was a very bright light that shone through the windows to the point where she couldn't see anything outside, and the little boy would try to lead her outside. My aunt would always be found in the morning by my uncle around the house, passed out on the bathroom floor, living room, even the garage one time. They just assumed my aunt was sleepwalking. So anyway, that night, at about 2 a.m. or so, everyone hears this loud screaming coming from the upstairs living room. Me, my dad, my aunt, and uncle all wake up and run upstairs because it sounded like someone was hurt. We get up there, and my cousin and her husband are in the living room, and my cousin's son, who is about 2 years younger than me, was sitting in a rocking chair, his back to us. But my cousin and husband were freaking out. So my dad and uncle walked over to my cousin and went to see what was wrong. My uncle touched his shoulder and he turned his head around, and it was bright red. His eyes were bloodshot, and his skin was starting to turn this weird greyish colour. When they tried asking him what was wrong, he started speaking in Latin and was rocking in his chair back and forth. Now, he was known as a kind of prankster, so my uncle and my cousin's husband, thinking he's playing around, yelled at him to stop and went to grab him out of the chair. When they touched him, that time, he let out a loud scream again in Latin, and his eyes started to roll in the back of his head. We were all freaking out at this point, not knowing what to do. My cousin went and got a glass of water, thinking maybe he's sleepwalking, and threw it on him. And he just laughed in this deep voice. My aunt was a pretty holy woman. She would keep crosses and angel statues and even holy water in the house. So she ran back downstairs to get the holy water because at this point, we realised something weird was going on. My dad and my uncle grabbed him out of the chair. He was kicking and trying to fight them the whole time and held him on the floor. My aunt brings over the holy water and rubs it on her hands. My cousin lifts up his shirt while he's being held down, and my aunt places her hand on his back. It literally burned him. It left a burn mark the exact size of her hand on his back. He screamed and screamed for a couple seconds before he ended up passing out. I'm just standing there the whole time, absolutely terrified, not moving, just watching this all happen. So he's passed out, and not knowing what to do, they call the police. It's probably around 3 a.m. at this point. So the police come with paramedics and talk to us all, and the meds check out my second cousin to see if he's okay. He ended up waking up, and they said he was fine, save the burn mark on his back. Not knowing what to do, the police recommended that they give Mrs. Warren a call, since she was a famous paranormal investigator and lived right in Connecticut. So nobody ends up going to bed at all, and me and my dad leave in the later morning. Now this next part I wasn't there for. About a week later, my aunt gives Mrs. Warren a call, tells her what happened and invites her to the house. Apparently Lorraine knew that the house was about before she even stepped foot in there. Apparently the newly built house was built on land that housed some kind of portal to the other dimension. The little boy in my aunt's dream was trying to lead my aunt outside through the portal, because if a human entered the portal, it would be open enough for demons to constantly go through. Apparently one got through and was able to possess my second cousin because he wasn't strong enough to fight it. Well, Lorraine ends up doing this whole seance and cleansing of the house to get rid of it all and close it permanently. They ended up living in that house for about another 8 years without any problems ever again before selling it and moving out of state. I never stayed over there again. To this day, that night still haunts me. I'm going to use fake names for a better flow and anonymity. Mercedes is my best friend of many years. Izzy is best friend's oldest 11-year-old daughter. Ryan is her 10-year-old son. Back in 2016, I shared an apartment with my best friend and another friend of hers. I had been home with my kids and roommates were out of the house. I had seen my son walk past a slightly open door, only to find out he was fast asleep on the couch. Ever since then, for the past 5 years, I've had many different situations that could have been something strange. Many of them can be semi-explainable. Air conditioning opening doors, kids or guests moving or taking something, but several more have had no reasonable causes. Unfortunately, I've always either been the only one awake to witness it, or just home alone in general. I try not to put too much weight on anything my kids say or do, just yet, since it's hard to separate their imagination and scary dreams with actual occurrences. Mercedes and her family have also had similar experiences, as well as her kids' level of input matching mine. Within the past month or two, we began jokingly saying that we could have just one entity or spirit attached to us both that will jump between houses. Mainly due to the fact that my house would be pretty calm and quiet when hers is active, and vice versa. Most activity between houses is pretty similar in nature as well. We both have many, many stories we could share that have been going on since the apartment, no matter where we moved to. Way too many to share all at once. Oh, she also had experiences in that apartment too. All that's basically to set the scene for Saturday. She had a birthday party for her daughters, and I stayed the night since she lives an hour away. We had just finished getting all 6 kids, hers and their friends, situated in whatever rooms they were sleeping in, and her boyfriend had their toddler in their bedroom, so it's just the two of us out around the house. Important to note, all of the bedrooms and one bathroom are in one hallway that ends at the back of the house. At the other end of the hallway, sharing the left wall, is their kitchen. Both the hallway and the kitchen end up and open up into the dining room. So I was standing in the kitchen where it and the hallway end, and she had just closed the door to the bathroom when I heard a young girl call out, "Mercedes," in a way that said they wanted something. It sounded like Izzy, whose room is at the complete opposite end of the hallway away from me. So I started heading down there while saying, "She's in the bathroom, what do you need?" I open her bedroom door and all 3 girls are looking at me funny, so I asked if they had just called for a mom, but they all said no. So I start heading for Ryan's room. Izzy follows me, and it's at about this time that I'm asking myself, why would she be calling Mercedes by name anyway? So I open Ryan's room and ask if any of them had called Mercedes. No again. In typical skeptic, I don't want to freak myself out fashion, I thought maybe I was hearing things, despite it sounding clear as day. I asked Izzy one more time if she had heard anyone call Mercedes, but she assured me that she hadn't. Mercedes had walked out, catching Izzy's reply, and said, "I heard my name too, and I heard you tell them I was busy." I looked at her and said, "We were the only ones who did. Everyone else said they didn't say or hear anything." She couldn't hear me asking around, so she had just fingered that whatever the kids had wanted was taken care of already. We have both shared experiences with someone else, but never together before, which I had realised was extremely odd considering for 5 years we had both been dealing with this, and I'm at her house a lot. That's my second home and safe haven. The timing was extremely strange as well, considering I had just sat down the night before and had written out everything from my place and hers since 2016 for the first time, in one giant story, meant to be sent into a spooky podcast. And then this. A few key points. Every person in the house was placed between me and the area we heard the voice come from. If I heard it, they should have too. Mercedes was standing close to the bathroom door when we heard the voice, but was further into the bathroom while I went into the kids' room to talk, so she couldn't hear us anymore. She only heard the very last exchange between me and Izzy, standing in the hall. This happened maybe a month or two after we jokingly theorised that we shared one attachment, and the day after our full story was written from the beginning. From the time her name was called to the time she walked out of the bathroom, I was able to verify that no one in the house was responsible before she even confirmed that she heard it too. Meaning it wasn't possible for us to just amp each other up into convincing ourselves of something that could have been explained otherwise. Thankfully, whatever it is has never felt malicious or dangerous, and it's actually helped us out on a few occasions, so we aren't too worried. It just freaked us out in the moment to have a situation where there's not a single feasible explanation, but also sucks that it was with each other, since both of our boyfriends just give us shit thinking we over exaggerate. I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts and skeptical reasoning. I may be open minded about everything, but it has two sides. Whatever may be possible because we haven't been there or seen it, but whatever may also not exist because we've never been there or seen it. Ever since I watched a show on Netflix, I have called entities with a specific behavior mimics. Like the name implies, they tend to mimic things like animals, specific voices, and even apparitions that look like a family member or friend. For at least about 4 years now, I've had situations that can be questioned as paranormal, but also may be explained logically. It seems like these occasions are getting more frequent and lean way more towards an entity than a super coincidence of very often scares. I've experienced the garden variety. Was that the AC, creaking boards, wind outside, or was it paranormal sort of things? Doors creaking an inch or two open, creepy taps, shuffling in the kitchen around the corner of the room darker than the rest at night, etc. Here lately, things have been interestingly loud. Of course, it's all at night, save one instance, and I'm the only one awake. But the noises I'm speaking of are not quiet enough to question if I imagined it. I've heard a scream all the way across the house, similar to my daughter's after a bad dream, but the tone and pitch was just a tad bit off. And she was peacefully asleep. I've heard three loud, perfectly timed apart bangs that were obviously originating from inside, not outside. I heard my boyfriend call me for me in the kitchen, followed by the shuffling feet, just to hear his loud snore in our bedroom immediately after. The sounds of my daughter and boyfriend are why I assume a mimic. I've had some pretty unexplainable things happen in the past two houses too, so if it is all the same thing, it's attached to me, not the house. I've worked at my job for 9 years. There's a common myth or legend of a ghost that resides in our kitchen. We have many staff with stories of their own, which I will include some of, as well as my own. The stories I heard before my own experiences were small things like a knife being moved from one side of the counter to another, utensils coming up missing, etc. There's usually just one employee at a time there, so it's not likely that someone else is moving them. My first hint at something close was a day our power went out. We had to keep staff on the clock for when it came back on, so a few of us decided to go to the completely blacked out kitchen to mess around. Another girl and I left shortly after because we were bored. A few minutes later, we were going to scare the other two. Before we could reach the swinging door that led to our back rooms, they came running out screaming they heard knocking. On the opposite end of the kitchen from any machines that could make something close to a sound like that. Then I started working back there myself. I know our brains can exaggerate sights in our peripheral, but I've never had that as severe as I did back there. It's always a tallish male with a black jacket walking down the hallway and into a room off the kitchen. Only when I would be slacking off or otherwise not working. I would just let him know I would get to work and that's that. The one that really got to me. The room off the kitchen has a motion-censored light. If something moves in the room, it comes on. This light comes on all the time with no one in there, and it's the only light like it that does this. One day I was standing in the doorway, facing the room, texting someone back. I felt a cold whoosh of air come from the room, right as the light came on. Needless to say, I jumped right back to work. My best friend has the best one, I believe. She was working overnight with another employee. She was in the office when the phone rang, like it would when being paged from the front. She answered, with no response, of course. After asking her coworker about it, they said they were not anywhere near the phone. She was prying him to admit to joking around to scare her when the front phone rang as being paged from the office. They were the only two in the store at all. The front phones also get paged often from different empty areas. Sometimes so often, we have to leave a phone off its hook to keep it on the line so it would stop ringing. Lately, Gusto has been venturing out. My store has more technology problems than I have ever seen or heard anywhere else. Multiple things break all the time. We've smelled cigarette smoke in a hallway on the other side of the store with no customers or employees around. Smell of gas in the front. Just odd things here or there that could possibly be explained away individually, but added together, they just don't make sense. All in all, I have come to find that Gusto is a nice ghost that just likes to see the employees working and not goofing off. I named him Gusto from the ghost chef of Ratatouille. I go downstairs to feed my hamster. As I get to the bottom, a door opens, handle turning and all. In the kitchen, getting him a treat, I can feel something watching me from the doorway. And on my way out, I instinctively stop. Like someone was there and I didn't want to bump into them. Anyway, I brush this off, go to my hamster where he's staring at one spot, a blank wall to the right of the door. He refuses to take his treat, brushing it away to keep staring. I pick him up, his head turns to keep looking at the same spot. They often stare off into space, but then their eyes are unfocused and they don't turn to keep on the same spot. I can feel something come closer and leaning over my shoulder, and again he turns to look exactly where I can feel something near me. It's a newish house that my parents moved to just over a year ago. I've been staying with them during the lockdowns, but never had anything feel paranormal about the place until tonight. It wasn't a malicious or scary feeling, just as if someone was in the room with me or something. My parents had just gone to bed. I also had the lights on and could clearly see nobody was there. At my parents' old house, I would always be absolutely terrified of this one, tiny spot at the bottom of the garden, and I couldn't say why. Despite not being at all nervous or scared of the dark or anything normally, park at night, no problem. Camping at night, I'm fine. But to the left of the swing set at the bottom of the garden, terrified. At one point, my dad built a pen down there for our guinea pigs. They would always stay to the far right of the pen, squealing and getting scared if we put them down on the left side of it, despite the whole thing being identical. After I made a new pen nearer the house, they would happily be on either side of it. One night I had a dream about a man in an old-fashioned clothing asking me to say goodbye to my dad for him. Ignoring it, I didn't say anything until almost a month later when my grandma brought some photos over. I recognized the same man from my dream. He had a really recognizable nose. And apparently he was my great-granddad. He was very close with my dad as a kid before he died. My grandma had the only photo of him. There wasn't a way I could have seen it before, as it had been at my aunt's house, who we never see and don't talk to. These are all the kinds of non-concrete experiences it sounds like a lot of people have. And I'm just as curious as to what non-paranormal explanations people come up with. The first one happened just now and made me think about this stuff. How it's strange I get a weird feeling of someone being there, and that's the exact spot my hammy is weirdly fixated on too. Short backstory. My family spent most of our lives growing up on a ranch in the middle of the desert here in Arizona. My brother, my cousin, my grandmother, grandfather, father, and myself have all seen two little girls out here that died in the 30s. We've all seen them. Can all describe exactly what they look like to each other. Other weird afterlife based stuff has happened there too. I was a deep skeptic until my 20s when we started seeing something else. Not relevant to what I need help with, but the native family members of my talk about there being a walker out there. And from what I know, I and others have seen together, it fits. I've also had years of weird stuff occur while camping or hunting in the forests, with 24 different witnesses. But again, unrelated. I now live in the city and my wife has had night terrors for the last year and a half. Never before that. My middle daughter has started sleepwalking. All fairly innocuous stuff to begin with, but it progressed over time. Over the past 2 months, my wife has nightly dreams of people being in our room. Her and I have had shared dreams about something along the lines of a succubus coming after me. I have nightmares inside of nightmares, that I can't escape from the presence. We're awoken by talking and we both hear the same words. My daughters wake up screaming. Dogs are locked in rooms and bathrooms when we come home. Not just with the door shut, actually locked, in different rooms. Pictures and paintings of crosses getting knocked off the wall in the middle of the night. My wife thought I was reading too much into it and has tried to rationalize it. I took some measures I'm familiar with to try and see if it eased the events last week. Nothing has occurred inside the house since then, but my dogs bark at nothing through the glass door to the patio. There's a giant black cat we've never seen before that sits in our courtyard the last 3 nights and stares into our kitchen window for an hour. My 6-year-old saw a blue man trying to walk through the sliding glass door last night. I woke up this morning to find 11 dead doves outside of our house. 6 of them were missing their heads, 5 with their necks turned and broken. No evidence of animals feeding on them. The house has been quiet inside, but it seems to have gotten more bizarre outside. Have I made things worse? Is there a way to end this? Am I jumping to conclusions? I feel nuts, but it feels like an assault on our home. Anyone? It was late at night, about 11 p.m. This happened almost 2 years ago. I was staying up all day to fix my bad sleep schedule. It was about the time for me to go to bed, but I wanted to stay up a little longer. My uncle offered me to go for a drive to pick up my grandma from work. I often go for these rides anyways. She works in the next town over, so it's about a 30-minute drive. Since I was awake for over 24 hours straight at this point, I was a bit lightheaded and tired. The ride to my grandma's work was normal, but the ride home is something I will never forget. I was staring out my window the whole ride. We were almost home at this point. We passed by the town museum only a few blocks from my house. Across the street from the museum, I see the silhouette of a very tall man on the sidewalk walking towards us. The man was at least over 9 feet tall compared to the size of the building he was walking next to. My heart sank to the bottom of my stomach. He was very wide in stature too, anything but slender in appearance. He was wearing an early 1900s outfit with a long coat and a top hat. Despite walking under a lamppost, he was completely black. As I see him walking, he fades slowly into thin air right in front of my eyes. I could only make out his silhouette for a mere second. The only explanation I have is that I was just seeing things because I was so tired. I've never mentioned it to anyone since because of that, but I can't help think if there's more meaning to the whole thing. All of my adult life, I've had mild experiences, with the exception of insane sleep paralysis, but that's another story, of paranormal encounters. Now, that all could be in my mind, and I understand that to many, it sounds crazy. But there is one instance that sticks with me hard to this day. A couple years back, I was living with my sister, her husband, my nephew, and a border collie. For some quick layout, their house was on 2 acres with a 3 bedroom house towards the front and a granny flat about 30 yards behind it, which is where I lived with my wife and newborn. They always told me stories about hearing high heels clip clop through the house, drop keys, and walk away. I thought they were nuts, although I did think about it every time I went into their house. Fast forward, I've been living with them for about 6 months. My sister and brother in law had something to take care of and asked me if I would watch my nephew. Me and my nephew were hanging out watching TV when I saw a shadow cross their French doors. I thought to myself, seems pretty early for them to be back already. I then realised there's no way they are home and I needed to check for intruders. So I sit my nephew down behind my bed, grab a gun, and go charging in. But no one was there. Am I tripping? I thought to myself, and went back to my house and got my nephew. About an hour later, I needed to grab something from their house. I walked over, grabbed it, and headed back to the back door when I felt it. A freezing chill run down my spine. I pulled out my phone, turned on my flashlight, and there he was. I don't know how I knew it was male, or how he seemed to be staring right at me. I could just feel it. He almost looked like static just standing there about 15 feet away. I greeted him and walked away slowly without ever taking my eyes off of him. He didn't seem to be malevolent or want anything, except for me to know that he existed. This is the third paranormal experience I've had in the house that I live in with my family. I won't go into the first two because this one is by far the most noteworthy. This happened about a month ago, at about 10 at night. I was sitting in my bedroom and my family was in the other room. For a little context, there's a long hallway separating the main living room, kitchen, dining room area from the bedrooms, which are right beside each other at the end of the hall. My bedroom is on the left and my bed is up against the wall closest to my parents' bathroom, which is accessible from their room only. As I said, it was about 10 and I was reading on my bed while my family was in the other room. As with most people, I've become accustomed to our house so much that I could determine the location of a person from the sound this floorboard makes, or air passing a curtain, or stuff like that. So I noticed that someone was walking up the hallway because I heard the sounds. They walked until they got right outside my door, which I can't see outside of while I'm on the bed. Paused for a second, and then continued into my parents' room. I heard the floor creak outside their bathroom, and then the sound of bare feet on the tile floor. The odd bumps of someone rustling around in the bathroom continued for about 10 seconds, and then vanished. I only became aware that this was odd after I didn't hear the floor creak as they were leaving. I had assumed that it was my dad because he shuffles more as he walks. Then I heard him talking in the other room, followed by my mom. Whatever, or whoever this was, it was aware that I was there and was just going about their business, fixing their hair, etc. It wasn't a scary experience, but it was more of just a hello from someone on a different plane of existence. In the latter half of 2017, I began to notice lights in our village primary school in England occasionally coming on in the evening when the school was locked up. I would go past the school and notice the lights were on in the junior area. Then upon passing later in the evening, they would be off. After a few months of this happening, I reported the occurrences to the school. They informed me that their lights were not operating on a timer and that the classroom lights are activated by switches in the classroom, and corridor lights are activated by motion detectors on the corridors. I was told the corridor lights were highly unlikely to be activated by a bug crawling over the sensor, although this couldn't be ruled out. I kept a log of the times I noticed the lights on and found no real pattern between each occasion. Late in the evening of 30th of December 2017, in what was probably a very stupid thing for a 14-year-old to do, I went out to the school fence, which was a short distance from the junior area of the school building, equipped with my phone and an EVP recorder. I had read about using shields of energy to protect yourself, and with the power of positive thinking, I was confident I was protected as I introduced myself. I informed any spirits that I was there peacefully, and, after a short while, asked if they would be able to turn the lights on for me in that particular area of the school. The lights promptly turned on, and I was startled and quickly left. As I was holding my phone to record, I didn't capture any footage of the lights turning on due to my swift departure. Dissatisfied at this, I returned a couple of days later. This next time, it was half past midnight on the 1st of January 2018. I used the shield protection again before positioning my phone on the fence and began recording. I followed the same procedure as the previous investigation, and after a few minutes of talking, I asked if any spirits present there could turn the lights on again for me. Less than 15 seconds later, the lights switched on in the corridor. Startled, I quickly left, returning shortly afterwards to collect the camera, thank any spirits, and then return home to review the footage. The 6-minute video has been cropped down to a period of 40 seconds and is linked at the description. In an attempt to confirm to myself that there was indeed something unusual occurring at the school, I headed back to the school around 11 p.m. on the 2nd of January 2018. Following the same procedure as the previous two investigations, the lights turned on after I asked them to. On this occasion, I didn't leave, and remained to thank the spirits like the previous occasions, and said I would leave them in peace and not disturb them again in the future. I would then pray for the spirits' peace when I returned home, hoping that positive thought would help anything there to settle. 2 days later, at 9:15 in the evening, I was watching the television in our living room with my parents, when there was an almighty crash at our front door, followed by silence. It was as if someone had thrown themselves against it. Our house was set away back from the road, and our dog, who was in the kitchen at the opposite side of the hallway, was looking out of our window. We have a low window with a window seat. When my dad and I checked, we found nothing there and no sign of any trespass. My parents and I believe the crash was linked with whatever was at the school. Nothing like that happened again, and the occurrences of lights turning on at the school decreased. I emailed the footage into the school when it reopened the following week, after the winter holidays. They confirmed the school had been completely locked and alarmed. For around a year afterwards, I would hear anecdotal reports of oppressive atmospheres from reception staff who were working alone at the school, along with the caretaker and a contractor working in the vicinity of the corridor reporting hearing footsteps. We had experienced other paranormal events in our house in the past, and for a couple of years afterwards, but the crash of the front door was one of the most significant and alarming ones. When I was about 8 or 9, we lived on a farm in rural Alberta. Like, our nearest neighbours were 50 acres away. We had a back porch that was about 15 feet up, and at the base of it were several rain barrels. One day, my mum and I were sitting out back and I was fishing into the rain barrels with a stick and yarn when my mum took a phone call and stepped inside really quick to use the washroom. I was outside for maybe 30 seconds when I reached too far over the railing and fell face first off the deck. As I was falling, I remember knowing that I was going to land face first into the rain barrel, which was full. My fingertips touched the water at the top. Being so young, I didn't realize how dangerous that was, and that I could have likely drowned. As soon as my fingers touched the water, time slowed down to a crawl, and I remember everything so clearly. I felt a hand firmly in the middle of my back between my shoulder blades and a hard push. I remember thinking it was my mom. I did a little flip forward and landed just behind the rain barrel, halfway underneath the deck. I sat up and looked around for my mom, but she wasn't there. So I picked myself up and wiped my bloody face off with both hands, and then used those same hands to open the sliding glass door. About 5 minutes later, my mom came back in the room and screamed because there were bloody handprints all over the window, and I was sitting on my rocking horse with blood running down my face. After I told her what happened, she went outside to look for my dad because we assumed he was the one that pushed me. He was an hour away, and no one else was around. We're religious, and we firmly believe that I was saved by a guardian angel that day. It's not the first or last time that I've had a near death experience that couldn't be explained as to why I actually lived through it. During my childhood, I used to live in the city of Patna, Bihar. We used to live in a joint family. Back in 2006, my cousin's sister, I'll call her S, had relocated to Bangalore to attend her engineering college. S was always cheerful, respectful, and courteous, and we couldn't ever imagine what was about to happen to her. One day, the doorbell rang, and I went to open the door. When I opened the door, I saw that S was standing there with a solemn look on her face. Our family ushered her in and asked her about the trip home, about 1,500 kilometres, to which she had no recollection. We later found out she had taken a flight home, although she claimed to have no idea. The next 6 months are as easy to recount as they were painful to live through. S started exhibiting signs of depression, although some in the family felt there was something more sinister to it. She wouldn't talk to anyone, wouldn't eat properly. At times, she'd start burning up with fever and screaming for it to stop. At night, she would start laughing manically, or sometimes wail and tear her hair out. If someone tried to console her, she'd outpour a filthy barrage of abuses in gruff, animal voice. Since my other sister is a psychiatrist, she promptly diagnosed her with depression, stemming from low self-esteem while in college, and started a course of medicines. The medicines were administered to her regularly for 6 months, but her condition didn't improve. My maternal aunt and uncle had reached a breaking point, and they decided to seek help of a master tantric, occult practitioner, and honestly, they'd have done just about anything to get their daughter back. The tantric in question was supposed to be extremely clairvoyant and adept at occult sciences. When he entered our home, S began to scream and wail at the sight of him. The tantric just stared at her for a while, then told us that he'd be going home to perform the exorcism ritual, and we would ensure that S doesn't leave the house during that time. After exactly 3 hours, S again started her screaming, although this time she tried to run out of the house. It took 4 or 5 males in the family to pin her down to the bed, although she still tried jumping out the window. Her screaming brought the entire neighbourhood, who gathered around the house to watch the spectacle. After about an hour, she fell completely silent and slept like a baby for another 6 hours. When she woke up, she calmly asked us what she was doing in her home, and not the college hostel where she was supposed to be. She had turned completely normal, except she said she couldn't remember the last 6 months that had passed by. My maternal uncle and aunt met the tantric and asked him what had happened to their daughter. The tantric nonchalantly replied that someone had put a lower class of Muslim spirit called jinn on her. He said that the spirit was induced inside her through first attaching the spirit to her hair, which was then mixed in biryani, a traditional Muslim rice dish, and fed to her. He also told them he knew exactly the identity of the person who did it, but he wasn't allowed to reveal it to them. My uncle then went home and carefully asked S about her the last thing she remembered from college. She told him that she had a Muslim friend who was in love with her and had proposed to her a few months ago. She wasn't interested in him and politely refused his advances. The guy begged her to remain friends, which she did. She said her last memory was the day of Eid, when the Muslim guy had invited her for lunch and served her biryani. She couldn't recollect anything after that. My aunt refused to let her go back to her college after that. She continued her education in a local college and later moved to the US and is living a normal life. Although we do avoid any mention of what happened to her, so as not to trigger any memories.